The east hall of the Hale mansion was always quiet at midnight, but tonight the Simons had a shape to it, a shape that belonged to one small figure on her knees in the middle of the marble floor. Adrian Hale stopped just inside the doorway. He had come home through the side garden because he had not wanted the staff to greet him. A flight from Tokyo, 14 hours of recycled air, and a private car from the airfield had emptied him out. He had loosened his tie before he saw her. He had taken a step before he understood what he was seeing. A woman in a plain grey work dress, her hair pinned in a low knot, was scrubbing the marble in long, careful arcs. A bucket of soapy water steamed faintly beside her. She had pushed up her sleeves. She had her back to him. The light from the high windows fell on her shoulders the way it had once fallen on those same shoulders in another life. He knew her shape before he knew her name. He knew the curve of her spine, the way she tilted her head, the angle of her wrist when she worked. He knew her the way a man knows a song he has not allowed himself to hum in 4 years. "Mara," he said, and the word was almost a whisper, almost a question. She froze. For a long moment she did not turn. The cloth in her hand stilled on the marble. He saw her shoulders rise once, very slowly, and fall again. He saw her cheek in profile, paler than he remembered, the hollow at the base of her throat more pronounced. When she finally lifted her face, it was not the face of a woman who had expected to be found. It was the face of a woman who had been preparing, every day for years, for the exact moment she had just lost. She rose. She did it carefully, with one hand braced against the floor and the other on her own waist. The grey work dress fell forward as she straightened, and he saw, with a small sound he did not mean to make, the soft, unmistakable curve beneath her apron. She was carrying a child. Adrian's first love, the woman he had not allowed himself to look for, was on her knees, scrubbing his mansion floor at midnight, and she was carrying his child, and he had not, until this minute, known either of those things. He could not move. He had imagined finding her in 1,000 cinematic ways. In the doorway of a small flat, opening it slowly, blinking at him. At a corner cafe in a city that was not his. At a wedding where she would be seated at the back. He had never, in any of his quiet midnight rehearsals, imagined her like this, bowed to the marble in his own house, the curve of a child she had not told him about, pressing softly against the cloth of a uniform that did not belong to her. "Mara," he said again, and it was different this time. It was not a question. It was a man trying to find his footing in a room whose floor had just dropped away. "Mr. Hale." Her voice was low and steady, and he hated her for the steadiness more than for any of it, because he understood at once that the steadiness was the only thing she had left. "I'll be finished in an hour. I won't be in your way." "I beg your pardon." "I said I won't be in your way. You will not be on your knees in this house, and you will not address me as Mr. Hale." The words came out cold and exact, and he was ashamed of them the moment they left his mouth, because it was the wrong tone, and he had spent 4 years promising himself he would never use that tone with her again, and here he was, in the first 30 seconds, doing it. "Mara, for God's sake, look at me." She looked at him. Her eyes were the same as he remembered, soft and brown and slow to give themselves away. And they were tired. They were tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. That was when he heard the small voice from the staircase. "Mama?" Adrian turned his head. A child stood at the top of the broad sweep of stairs, one hand on the polished banister, the other clutching a stuffed grey rabbit by its ear. He was very small. He could not have been more than 3. He was wearing pajamas with little white stars on them, the kind that came in plastic packets from a grocer, and his dark hair was sticking up where he had slept on it. He was looking down at Adrian with the calm, owl-eyed seriousness of a child who has already learned not to make sudden noise in a strange house. Mara made a sound, half her son's name, half a swallowed prayer. "Theo, Sweetheart, I told you to stay in the room. I waked up. The boy considered Adrian gravely. He took one careful step down. Are you the man in the picture? Adrian did not know what picture. He did not, for the first time in many years of board meetings and acquisitions and cool, decisive sentences, know anything at all. Theo, Mara said again, sharper now, climbing the lower stairs in 2 quick strides, the bucket forgotten, her wet hands held away from her dress. Come here, baby. Come back to bed. Mama. The child held his arms up and let her catch him on the landing. He pressed his small face into her neck. He looked at Adrian over her shoulder. And then, quite clearly, in the perfectly ordinary voice of a sleepy little boy who has not yet learned that some words make grown men stop breathing, he said, Daddy? The marble hall held the word for a long, ringing moment. Mara closed her eyes. Adrian Hale, 31 years old, the youngest chairman in the history of Hale Capital, the man whose face had been on the cover of 3 magazines that month, stood at the foot of his own staircase, with his coat still on, and felt the carefully constructed architecture of his life come apart in a single, quiet syllable. Mara, he said. His voice was not the voice of a chairman. It was not the voice of any of the men the magazines had photographed. It was the voice of a boy who had once asked her, in a kitchen with bad lighting and good coffee, whether she would marry him. Whose child is that? She did not answer. She turned, with the boy in her arms, and walked up the staircase in her wet apron, and did not look back. He did not follow her. He did not, for a long time, do anything at all. The bucket of soapy water sat on the marble floor between them, like the last remaining proof that the world had been ordinary 30 seconds ago. The cloth lay beside it, wrung out, neat. The lemon smell of the soap drifted up to him. Somewhere above, a door closed quietly. Adrian Hale set down his briefcase. He sat down, very slowly, on the bottom step of his own staircase. He pressed both hands against his face. He sat that way for a long time. When he finally lowered his hands, the head housekeeper, Rosa, was standing in the corridor archway with her arms folded across her aproned chest. She had been with the family for 22 years. She had taught him how to tie his shoes when he was 6. Rosa, he said quietly. How long has she been working in this house? 3 months, Mr. Adrian. Under what name? Mara Reyes. He nodded once. He did not look at her. And the boy? He sleeps in the small room behind the laundry, on the cot. He is a very good child. He never makes noise. She brings him because the nightminder is too expensive. 3 months. 3 months. And you knew? It was not an accusation. It was a man asking the only person in the house who would tell him the truth. Rosa did not flinch. I knew her face the first day. I have known her face since you brought her here for tea 4 years ago, before everything. I gave her the job because she needed it, and because she would not lie to me about who she was when I asked. She asked me only one thing, sir. She asked me if you were ever expected at the house. I told her no. I told her you lived in the city flat. It has been true for 3 months. It is not true tonight. No, Adrian said. It is not true tonight. He looked up at the staircase. The hall was empty. She is expecting. Yes, sir. By whom? Rosa did not answer that question. She did not have to. The look she gave him was the look of a woman who had carried him on her hip when he was 3 years old, and she let it carry the rest. He nodded. He stood up. Send for Dr. Bell. At this hour, sir. At this hour. And tell him to bring whatever he needs for a woman who has been on her knees for 4 hours after a 16-hour day. And then have the small room behind the laundry stripped and the bed in the south guest suite turned down. and the cot moved up beside it. "And Rosa?" "Yes, sir. My mother is not to know that this house has anyone in it tonight except me. Not by telephone, not by message, not by any servant who values his post. Are we clear?" "Very clear, sir." He went to the foot of the stairs. He laid one hand flat on the polished banister where the small boy's fingers had rested. He stood there a moment longer, looking up at nothing. "Daddy," he said, almost soundlessly, as if testing whether he could say the word at all. Then he climbed the stairs. The south guest suite was warm. Dr. Bell came at 1 in the morning in his overcoat, with his black bag and his white hair, and Adrian sat in the upholstered chair outside the closed door for 40 minutes, with his elbows on his knees and his jacket folded over the chair arm, and his hands clasped between his knees, the way a man does when he is praying without knowing how. Theo had been settled on the cot beside the bed. Through the door he could hear the doctor's low voice, then the murmur of Mara's, slower and lower, and then nothing for a long time. When Dr. Bell came out, he closed the door behind him very gently, and he did not greet Adrian by his title. "Adrian, tell me." "She is 16 weeks along. The pregnancy is intact. The baby is, by every measure I can take in your hallway, healthy. The mother is exhausted to a degree I have not seen outside of a hospital ward in some time. She has lost weight she did not have to lose. Her pressure is too low. She has been on her feet 10 to 12 hours a day for at least 3 months. Her hands are cracked. She has not slept properly in weeks. She also has not seen a doctor since she found out about the baby. Not once." Adrian closed his eyes. "What do you need?" "I need her in this bed for a minimum of 4 days. Not on her feet, not standing for a meal. I need a proper diet. I need iron. I need quiet. I need her to understand that if she keeps doing what she has been doing, she will lose this baby, and possibly her own health on top of it." Dr. Bell paused. "She knows. She is a clever woman. She has known for some weeks. She has, in her own words, been managing. Managing. Managing." The doctor's mouth was tight. "There is a small boy on the cot beside her bed. She told me, when I asked, that she did not have anyone she could leave him with for a doctor's appointment. She told me this without self-pity. She is a woman who has been quietly drowning for some time, Adrian. I'm not asking. I'm telling you what is needed." "Yes." "Good." Dr. Bell hesitated at the door. "Adrian?" "Yes." "The boy?" "Yes." "He is yours." It was not a question. Adrian Hale, who had built an empire on his ability to keep his face still in any conversation that mattered, did not keep his face still. "I did not know," he said, "until tonight." "I thought as much." Dr. Bell put a hand briefly on his shoulder. It was the hand that had delivered him 31 years ago in a hospital his father had paid to have built. "You will do what is right, then. I have known your mother a long time, my boy. I have also known you. I will trust you and not her." Adrian could not speak. Dr. Bell let himself out. It was nearly 2 in the morning when Adrian opened the door of the south suite. The bedside lamp was on, low. Mara was lying on her side facing the cot, one arm under her cheek, the other across the small bump she had been hiding under her work apron. Theo was curled on the cot, with his stuffed rabbit pressed under his chin. Both of them were asleep. Mara's hair, freed from its pin, lay across the pillow in a long, dark wave. Adrian crossed the carpet without sound. He stood beside the bed. He did not sit. He did not touch her. He looked at the bump beneath her hand, and then at the small, dark head on the cot, and at last at her face. There was a deep crease between her eyebrows, even in sleep. She had a faint bruise across one cheekbone, the kind a tired person earns walking into a doorframe in the dark. He stayed there a long time. When he finally left, he closed the door without making a sound, and he went down the hall to his own bedroom, and he sat on the edge of the bed in his rumpled travel shirt, and he did not sleep. He had been gone 4 years. He had been gone too long. He had a son. He had not known. He was going to find out, before this house was an hour older, whose decision it had been to keep that from him. And then he was going to undo it. The South Suite, in the small grey hour before dawn, was the kind of room she had not slept in for 4 years. The wallpaper was a pale silvered green, with a small repeating pattern of ferns. The curtains, drawn against the night, were a heavy raw silk with the weight in them of a much colder season than the one outside. The bed itself was so deep that, in turning over toward the cot, she had felt the mattress give beneath her in a slow, accommodating way that her own beds, in the village and in the cheap rented flats since, had not. The sheets had been ironed. The pillow had been turned. There was, on the small bedside table, a glass of water with a slice of lemon floating in it, and beside the glass, a single, crisp folded handkerchief that had not been there when she had fallen asleep. Someone, in the night, had come in on careful feet and put a glass and a handkerchief beside the bed of a woman they had decided to keep alive. She did not need to ask who it had been. She knew the angle of the folded handkerchief. Mara woke at 6 in the morning to a soft, careful weight on the edge of the bed and the smell of toast. Theo was sitting cross-legged at her feet, balancing a small saucer on his lap. On the saucer were 2 thick triangles of toast, slightly burnt on one side, spread with too much butter. A glass of milk had been placed within his reach on the nightstand. The cot, made up neatly with its blanket folded, was empty. "Mama," Theo whispered, in the voice of a child who has been instructed to be quiet. "The big man helped me. He said you have to eat first." Mara sat up against the pillows. The room was unfamiliar. The light through the heavy curtains was the wrong color. The bed was too soft. Her body ached in the deep, useless way it always ached after a long shift, and her chest ached in a way it had not ached in nearly a year. She remembered. She remembered the marble hall. She remembered standing up. She remembered Adrian's face, the white shock of it. She remembered Theo's small voice saying the word she had spent 3 years promising he would never need to say to a stranger. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, Theo was holding a triangle of toast up to her with grave ceremony. "He buttered too much," her son told her. "But it tastes good." "Where is he, sweetheart?" "Outside the door." Theo lowered his voice further, conspiratorial. "He said he will not come in unless you say. He said I can come and tell him if you need anything." Theo considered the question. "I think he is sad." Mara took the toast from her son's small, sticky fingers. She made herself bite into it. The butter was salted. The bread was the good bakery bread Rosa kept in the pantry. She did not realize she was crying until Theo reached up with one finger, very serious, and touched her cheek. "Don't cry, Mama." "I'm not crying," Mara said. "It's the toast. It's very good toast." "Okay." Theo settled himself more firmly against her side. He took a piece of toast for himself and chewed it thoughtfully. "Mama, is he my daddy?" The room was very quiet. "Yes, baby," Mara said, and her voice did not break, because it had broken too many times in private for it to know how to do it now in front of her son. "Yes, he is." Theo nodded, satisfied. He took another careful bite. "He is very tall." "Yes, he is." "He has the same eyes as me." Mara had to set the toast down for a moment. "Yes, he does." "Is he going to live here?" This is his house, Theo. Are we going to live here? She did not know how to answer that. There was a soft knock at the door. Theo brightened. That's him! Theo, sweetheart, can you tell him I need a minute? Theo slid off the bed with the toast saucer in both hands and trotted to the door. He opened it just wide enough to put his head out. My mama needs a minute, he said in his official voice. She likes the toast. You can come back soon. There was a low murmur from the corridor. Okay, Theo said. He closed the door very carefully. He padded back to the bed. He climbed up. He settled the toast against Mara's hip. He is going to bring you tea. I told him you don't take sugar. Mara looked at her son. She looked at the door. She looked at the curve of her own belly under the blanket. She had told herself every single morning of those 3 months that she could survive being invisible in this house if it kept Theo fed and warm. She had told herself that Adrian would never come back to live here, that Vivian never set foot in the kitchens, that she could move on the edges of a life that had once almost belonged to her. She had told herself that she did not, any more, owe Adrian Hale anything but the silence she had given him. And now, Adrian Hale was outside her door, making her tea without sugar. She closed her hand around her son's small wrist. All right, baby, she said. All right. When Adrian came in, with a tray balanced carefully in 2 hands as if it were a piece of fragile equipment, he did not look at her as if she were a thing he had caught. He looked at her as if she were a thing he had lost and found, and was afraid to set down again. He put the tray on the writing desk. He carried the cup of tea to the nightstand. He set it down without rattling the saucer. He did not, this time, ask her any questions. He pulled the chair to a careful, polite distance from the bed and sat down in it with his hands open on his knees. Eat the toast, he said. Please. She ate the toast. Theo, leaning against her side, watched both of them with the patient interest of a small judge. Adrian, Mara said at last, and his name in her mouth made him close his eyes for a moment. I'm not going to discuss anything in front of him. No, Adrian said. Of course not. He needs to be somewhere with people he knows. Rosa is downstairs. He has met her. She has biscuits. Adrian's eyes flicked, the faintest possible smile, to the boy. She told me, a moment ago, that she has a great deal of cleaning to supervise in the conservatory, and a small assistant would be very useful. Theo perked up. I help. You help very well, Adrian said, and the gentleness in his voice was, for Mara, the worst thing she had heard in 4 years, because it was not performed. He had not, 4 years ago, known how to be gentle to a child. He had known how to be gentle to her. He was now, evidently, going to learn the rest. Theo, Mara said, go and find Rosa, baby. Theo wriggled to the edge of the bed. He hesitated. He looked back at Adrian. Don't make my mama cry, Theo said, with the absolute, terrible authority of a very small child. No, Adrian said, quietly. I won't. Theo nodded once and trotted to the door and let himself out. The door closed. The room held very still. Mara set the tea down. She folded her hands over the curve of her belly and looked at the man who had been the first thing she had ever loved. Ask me, she said. Whatever you want to ask. Ask me. Adrian Hale, who had once won a $6 billion acquisition by waiting a single second longer than the man across the table, looked at the woman on the bed and did not know how to begin. Why? He said. Why what? Why all of it? Mara was quiet for a long moment. 4 years ago, she said, you lost your father. You went to Singapore. You said it would be 6 weeks. It was not 6 weeks. It was 6 months. While you were gone, your mother came to my flat one Tuesday afternoon. She came alone. She brought a check. Adrian did not move. I did not take the check, Mara said. I told her to leave. She went. She drew in a small breath. 3 days later, a courier came with a letter. The letter was on your stationery. It was in your handwriting. I knew your handwriting. I had a book of it. I had a year of birthday cards. The letter said you had been thinking about it for some time. It said you had concluded that we were not, in the end, suited. It said you wished me well. Her voice did not change. She could have been reading a recipe. It was written in your handwriting, and it was signed in your name, and it was not from you. I know that now. I did not know it then. She paused. I tried to call you. The number had been changed. I tried the office. I was told that Mr. Hale was not taking personal calls. I tried twice more. The third time, the voice on the line, who knew me, who had been kind to me at every previous call, told me, very gently, that I was on a list. I was not to be put through. Those were her instructions. From your office. Mara, I am not finished. 2 weeks after the letter, I found out I was carrying Theo. She paused. I sat on a bathroom floor in my flat, and I did the arithmetic on the back of a receipt, and I understood that I had a choice. I could carry a child whose father had told me, in his own hand, that he did not want me, into a family that had told me, with a check, that I did not belong, and I could spend the rest of my life trying to prove to that family that my child deserved a name. She took a slow breath. Or I could leave. I could go quietly and keep my dignity and raise my son on what I could earn, and never in my life beg a man for anything I had not been freely offered. She let the breath out. I left, Adrian. I packed a case. I gave my landlord notice. I went to my mother's village in the north. I had a baby in a small public hospital. I named him for my grandfather. I did not write to you. I did not tell you. You had told me, in writing, that you were finished. I believed you. I am ashamed of how easily I believed you. But I was 24 years old, and I was alone, and I believed you. Adrian's face had gone the color of paper. And the baby, he said, his eyes on the curve of her hands. The baby, Mara said, and for the first time, her voice was not steady. The baby is also yours. She kept her hand on the small bump. The baby is from one night, a year ago. The wedding of a woman we both knew. You came late. We danced. You walked me out to a taxi. You stood on the curb a long time, Adrian. And you did not let me get in the taxi. And I did not get in the taxi. She paused. I went home with you. I went home with you because I had been 3 years without you, and one night does not seem like a great deal to ask when you have been 3 years without somebody. I told myself, in the morning, that it was a closing of an account, that I would take the night and I would go. Another pause. You were called away before I woke. There was a note on the pillow. The note was kind. The note was a little bit funny. The note said you would call me at noon. I read the note. I left before noon. I did not give you my number. I had still not told you about Theo. I did not then intend to. You were going to leave again. I had already left, Adrian. I was leaving on principle every morning for 3 years. That night did not undo 3 years. It only made the leaving harder. So I made it cleaner. I put my number out of your reach. I went home to my son. I told myself it was the last time. I meant it. Her hand tightened over the bump. 6 weeks later, I knew. And you did not. I did not. She looked at him. I had spent 3 years raising your son alone after a letter you did not write. I was not, in that moment, going to telephone the chairman of Hale Capital and inform him, by way of his secretary, that there was now a second child. I told myself I would find a way. I told myself I would manage. I did manage. For 9 months, I managed. The school where I taught restructured. I lost the job. I lost the flat that came with the job. I went looking for work. I did not have references that were 2 years old, and I had a small son and a stomach that was beginning to show. She glanced at the room around her. Rosa did not flinch when she saw me. Rosa gave me a uniform and the key to the back door. Rosa did not ask. I did not tell her you were ever expected. She did not tell me you were either. I think she was waiting. She looked at him. She knew you would come. I think she wanted you to come. He was not breathing well. "Mara," he said. "I am not finished." "All right. I am not asking you for anything. I have not in 4 years asked you for anything. I am not going to start. I will leave this house tomorrow." "No," Adrian said, very quietly. "You will not. You do not get to decide, Adrian." "I know." He stood up. He crossed the carpet, slowly, and he sank to one knee beside the bed. Not the chair, the floor. He took her hand off the bump and folded both of his hands around it. His head was lower than hers. He did not raise his face. "I did not write that letter," he said. "I know that now. I did not change my number. I know that too. I came back from Singapore on the 8th of March. I came back with a ring in my coat pocket. I went to your flat. The flat was empty. There was a "To Let" sign in the window. I went to your office. They told me you had given 2 weeks' notice in February. I went to your mother's house in the north. Your mother told me she had not seen you since Christmas. I sat in her kitchen for an hour. I understood, in her kitchen, that you had gone somewhere I could not follow you. I went home. I went to my mother. I asked her, very plainly, whether she had had any communication with you. She told me she had not. She told me, with her eyes, that I was not to ask the question again. His shoulders moved. I believed her. I am ashamed of how easily I believed her. Adrian, I looked for you for a year. I had people looking for you for 2 years after that. I did not find you. You were very good at not being found. He pressed his forehead briefly to the back of her hand. I did not know about Theo. I would have come for him. I would have come for him on a bicycle if I had known. I would have torn this house down with my own hands. I would have put my mother out of it with a single envelope. Mara, I would have come for you on a bicycle. Do you understand? I would have come on foot. She did not answer. I am asking you, he said, to stay in this house until the baby comes. I am asking you not as the chairman of anything. I am asking you as the man who put the ring back in his coat pocket and never took it out again. I am asking you to let me earn 1 day. 1 day. After the day, you may decide what you want. The house, the name, the baby's name, all of it. You may decide. I am asking you for the chance to earn the day. Mara looked down at the dark head of the man kneeling beside her bed. Adrian, she said. Yes. Don't kneel in this house. Not for me. I have done enough kneeling in this house for both of us. He let out a sound that was not quite laughter, and not quite anything else. He lifted his head. His eyes were wet. All right, he said. All right. He stood up. He did not let go of her hand. 1 day, he said. 1 day, she said. The next 4 days, she did not leave the South Suite. Dr. Bell came twice a day. A small woman, with a soft voice and an enormous black satchel, was installed in a chair by the window in the afternoons. She was, it turned out, a midwife of considerable reputation, retired to a cottage on the coast, who had been reactivated by a single telephone call from Adrian and a private car that had collected her at dawn. The small woman knitted. She drank tea. She did not speak unless Mara spoke first. When Mara spoke, she answered, and what she answered was always practical. And at the end of the second day, Mara found herself, against her will, telling the small knitting woman about the cracked place on her left palm, and the exact moment in the second trimester when she had stopped being able to bend down to tie Theo's shoes. Theo made himself at home in the conservatory. He helped Rosa polish the brass watering cans. He stood on a low stool to wash a single window with a single rag. Rosa told him, gravely, that he had improved the window. Theo told her that the window had needed it. He had a piece of bread with butter at 11, and a piece of apple at 3, and a small cup of milk before bed. He took the small cup of milk to Mara each evening. He climbed onto the bed and drank it sitting beside her with his head against her shoulder, and told her, in long, whispered narratives, what the conservatory windows looked like, and why. Adrian came in twice a day. He did not sit down without asking. He did not stay longer than 15 minutes. He brought, the first morning, a stack of books he remembered her once liking, which he had bought, he admitted, in the airport in Tokyo, because they had a bookshop with the right kind of paperbacks. He brought, the second morning, a small jar of the salted plums she had liked in the second year they had known each other, which had not been easy to find. He brought, the third morning, nothing, and instead he sat in the chair and read aloud to her from a magazine article about a chef who had opened a restaurant in a converted post office, until she fell asleep. On the fourth morning, he brought his mother. Mara heard the voices in the corridor before the door opened. Vivian Hale's voice was low and elegant and entirely in control. Adrian's voice was low and elegant and not. "You will not raise your voice in this corridor," Vivian was saying. "You will explain to me what you think you are doing." "I'm bringing you to apologize." "To a maid, Adrian." "To my fiancé." "You have lost your mind." "On the contrary, I have at last found it." "Adrian!" "You will come into this room. You will sit in the chair. You will say what you should have said 4 years ago. Then you will leave my house, and you will not return until you have understood what you did. This is not a request." "Adrian!" "It is not a request, Mother." The door opened. Vivian Hale came in first. She was 61 years old. She wore grey wool and pearls. She had the exact straight back and the exact courteous chin of a woman who had not, in 40 years, been told no, and not arranged for it to be reversed. She stopped 2 steps inside the room. She looked at Mara. She looked at the bump. She looked at the small cot, made up neatly beside the bed. She looked at Theo, who had been brought in a moment before by Rosa, and was sitting cross-legged on the foot of the bed, building a small tower of plastic blocks the housekeeper had produced from a forgotten attic box. Theo looked up. He looked at Vivian. He considered her gravely. "Hello," Theo said. Vivian did not answer. Adrian, standing behind his mother in the doorway, said her name very quietly. "Mother." Vivian lifted her chin a fraction higher. "Vivian," Mara said, and her voice was the voice of a woman who had been preparing this sentence, in some quiet part of herself, for 4 years. "You have come. Good. There is a chair by the window. Please use it. I am tired. I will not stand for you, and I will not curtsy for you. And you will not, in this room, address me as anything but my own name. If those terms are unacceptable, you may leave, and you may take with you the apology my son will not require. Adrian, close the door." Adrian closed the door. Vivian, very slowly, sat down in the chair by the window. "You are expecting," she said. "I am." "His?" "Yes." "And the boy?" "His." Vivian looked at Theo. Theo, who had picked up on the temperature in the room with the unerring radar of a 3-year-old, slid quietly off the bed and went to stand against Mara's leg. He looked up at Vivian with grave brown eyes. "He has Adrian's eyes," Vivian said, faintly. "He has my eyes," Mara said. "Adrian has my eyes also. We can argue about it later." There was a long silence. "I wrote the letter," Vivian said. Adrian, behind her chair, had become very still. "I know you did," Mara said. "I had it written. I did not write it personally. I had a man do it. A man who had once worked for the firm. He was paid well. He was discreet. He had a steady hand and the right kind of pen. The signature was practiced from a card." Vivian's voice was very even. "I had your number changed at the exchange. It cost me a week and 3 favors. I had your name placed on a list at Adrian's office. I gave instructions to your landlord about the flat. He was, as it happened, a tenant of mine elsewhere. I did not pay for the flat to be vacated. He vacated it himself because I told him, by letter, that I would prefer it." She paused. "I did all of this in 3 weeks. It was not difficult. It was the easiest set of arrangements I have ever made." Another pause. "I did it because my son was 27 years old and had a company to inherit, and was about to marry an art history graduate from a village that did not show up on the second page of an atlas. I told myself, with great clarity, that I was protecting him. I told myself, with the same clarity, that you would recover, because girls of your age recover quickly, and that he would recover, because boys of his sort recover even faster." Her hands tightened in her lap. "I was wrong about both of you. I have been wrong in this matter for 4 years. Mother, I am not finished, Adrian. I have not in 4 years said this aloud." Vivian's hands were folded in her lap. They were not steady. "I would like to say it aloud now," she went on. "And I would like you to be in the room, because I would like, if it is possible, never to say it again." She turned her face toward Mara. "Miss Quinn, I did you a wrong from which I do not know how a person recovers. I separated you from a man you loved. I made you doubt his word. I made you, in some quiet and indirect way, sit alone on a bathroom floor in a flat I had had emptied, and discover that you were carrying a child whose father, I had told you, did not want you." She drew in a careful breath. "I do not know how to set that right. I do not know that it can be set right. I have, since the day my son came back from Singapore with a ring in his pocket and a face I had not seen on him before, known that I could not undo what I had done. I have not spoken of it. I have not been brave enough to speak of it." A pause. Her chin lifted. "I am speaking of it now because my son has put me in this chair. And between the two of us, he is, today, the more frightening person in this house." She looked briefly at Adrian, then back to Mara. "I am ashamed, Miss Quinn. I am 61 years old, and I am ashamed for the first time in my life. I do not ask anything of you. I will not see this child. I will not see the next. I will leave this house this morning. I will not return without your written permission, which I do not expect to receive." She paused. "I have one request. I would like, before I go, to know the boy's name." Theo, who had been listening with his head against Mara's hip, looked up at his mother. Mara looked down at her son. She put her hand on his small, dark head. "His name is Theo," she said. "Theodore James Quinn. He is 3 years old. He is very kind. He is very clever. He is loved. He has not in his life lacked anything but a father, and he will not lack one again. You may say his name aloud once, if you wish. You may not address him." Vivian nodded very slightly. "Theodore," she said. Theo did not answer.
Vivian stood up. She crossed the room. She stopped at the door. She turned.
Adrian. Yes, Mother. I will resign from the Foundation Board on Monday. I will resign from the Museum Board on Tuesday. I will withdraw my name from the Christmas Committee. I will write to the editor of the magazine. I will say what is necessary in each case to make it clear that this family's good name belongs to the woman in this bed and not to me. Her voice did not break. Do not, please, ask me to come back into this house. I would prefer not to. It is the only kindness I can do you now. Goodbye. She left. The door closed. Adrian stood with one hand on the back of the chair she had been sitting in. His face was very pale. Mama, Theo said quietly. Was that the lady in your story? What story, baby? The lady who made you cry? Yes, Theo. That was her. She was sad too. Yes, Mara said. She was sad too. Is she my granny? Mara opened her mouth. She closed it again. No, baby, she said at last. She is your father's mother. That is a different thing. And it is going to take all of us a while to think about what we want it to mean. Theo nodded gravely. He climbed back onto the bed. He resumed his tower. Adrian came to the chair beside the bed. He sat down. He put his face in his hands. He sat that way for a long time. The afternoon was slow after Vivian left. The corridors of the south wing held the kind of hush that follows a thunderstorm in late summer, when the air has not quite settled and the leaves are still wet against the high windows. Sunlight moved across the carpet of the south suite in long, pale bars and crept, very gradually, up the foot of the bed. The valet's clock on the mantel ticked evenly into the quiet. Somewhere down the corridor, Rosa's slow, careful footsteps passed the door, paused, and went on. Mara, propped against the pillows, watched the bars of light cross her hand. She did not, for a long time, think about Vivian. She had thought about Vivian, in fragments, every day for 4 years, and the woman in the chair by the window had not been the woman she had thought about. And there was, in that, a small and disorienting relief. The woman she had carried in her head had been a tall, pale figure with a check in her hand, frozen in the doorway of her flat on a Tuesday afternoon. The woman in the chair had been older. The woman in the chair had had hands that were not steady. The woman in the chair had said the word ashamed aloud in a room with 3 other people in it, and had then walked out of her own house, and had not asked for anything in exchange. That was, Mara understood slowly, not forgiveness. Forgiveness was a thing she did not yet know whether she had in her, and was certainly not, today, going to manufacture in order to be polite to anyone. But it was, she allowed, the first piece of the architecture coming down. The check on the kitchen table had, for 4 years, been the heaviest thing in her chest. It had been heavier than the letter. It had been heavier than the empty flat. The woman in the chair, by saying it aloud, had taken the check off the table. Mara closed her eyes. She put both hands on the small bump under the blanket. She breathed. Theo came in at some point with the saucer of biscuits Rosa had given him. He climbed onto the bed without consulting her. He arranged the biscuits in a row on the bedspread between them. He gave Mara the largest. He took the smallest for himself, gravely, on the principle, evidently, that smaller hands took smaller biscuits. He did not say anything. He chewed slowly. He watched the bars of light on the bedspread move across the row of biscuits. She put her hand on his back. The small bones moved as he chewed, under her palm. The week stretched. The mansion, which had once been a house Mara had walked through on Adrian's arm with the polite bewilderment of a young woman who had never seen so many doors, became a house that arranged itself, in small, careful ways, around her. The cook learned the foods she could keep down at 16 and 17 weeks. The laundress learned that her uniform was no longer required and folded it away in a paper-lined drawer in case Mara wanted it later, which she would not. The gardener brought her, on the 5th morning, a small posy of pale roses from the conservatory in a chipped enamel mug, because, he said gruffly, the cut-glass vases were not his department, and roses did not care. Theo discovered the south lawn. He discovered the ornamental pond. He discovered, with a small shriek of delight, the koi. Adrian, who had been a boy in this house and had not known the garden was for boys, sat on the stone edge of the pond, with his sleeves rolled up, and named the fish for his son. There was a fat orange one called Mr. Pin, and a small white one called Sock, and a calico one whose name Theo solemnly insisted was Dr. Banana, for reasons that Adrian did not contest. Mara watched from the south suite window. She watched the way Adrian sat with his elbows on his knees and listened to the boy talk. She watched the way he laughed, once, at something Theo said, and immediately covered his mouth with his hand because the laugh had surprised him. She watched the way Theo, after an hour, climbed into Adrian's lap to inspect the watch on his wrist, and the way Adrian, very slowly, as if he were afraid the boy might bolt, settled one arm around his son's small back. She put her hand against the cold glass. She did not know what she felt. She knew only that she had spent 4 years preparing herself, in some quiet inner room, to despise this man, and that the man on the stone edge of the pond was making it impossible to keep the room. On the 6th morning, Mara went downstairs. She had not been down the main staircase in the daylight in 3 months. She had used the back stair behind the laundry in her uniform after dark with a bucket. She had not touched the polished mahogany of the front banister with her bare hand since the night Adrian had brought her here 4 years ago, on his arm in a green dress. This morning, she wore a soft, loose linen tunic that someone had laid out on the chair. She was barefoot. She had her hand on the banister. She paused on the broad landing where the stair turned, and she looked, for a long moment, at the marble hall below, where the morning light came in through the tall windows in 3 long, pale strips. There was no bucket on the floor. There was, in the middle of the hall, a small boy in 2 large slippers, standing very still with his head tipped back, looking up at her.
Mama?
Yes, baby.
You came down.
Yes.
Daddy is in the room with the books. He is on the telephone. He has been on the telephone since the toast.
Theo considered this gravely.
He said the bad word once.
What bad word?
I am not allowed to say it.
Then you should not say it.
I will whisper it. You should not even whisper it.
Theo accepted this with dignity. He held up his hand. Mara came down the rest of the stairs and took it. They walked together across the marble. The marble was cold under her stockinged feet. She remembered the cold of it. She did not, this morning, mind it. Theo led her past the conservatory, past the small parlor, past a door she had never been allowed to open. He stopped with great ceremony in front of a tall set of double doors. "This is the room with the books," he announced.
I know which room it is, sweetheart.
He said you are not to come in. He said the room is not for you to come in. He said it because he is on the telephone and the telephone is shouting. Theo lowered his voice. "I think you are allowed." "I think so too." She pushed open one of the doors. Adrian was at the long mahogany desk by the windows, in shirt sleeves, with the receiver of an antique brass and bakelite telephone braced between his ear and his shoulder. He was leaning forward over a spread of papers. He was, very precisely and very quietly, telling someone on the other end of the line that they had until 4 o'clock that afternoon to issue a public correction to a story they had not yet printed. He looked up. He saw her. He said, "I will telephone you back," and put the receiver into the cradle without waiting for an answer.
Mara. Adrian. You are downstairs.
"I am."
Dr. Bell.
has approved short walks. He told me yesterday. I did not tell you because I wanted to surprise the marble."
He laughed before he could stop himself. He stood up. He came around the desk. He did not, this time, ask permission. He put one hand very lightly on her elbow, and one hand even more lightly against the bump. "You walked the stairs." "Slowly." "With Theo?" "He insisted." "He has been insisting since the toast." She put her hand over his hand on the bump. "Adrian, what are the papers?" He looked for a moment as if he might lie. He did not. "3 editors," he said. "2 of them have a long lens photograph of you sitting on the south terrace yesterday afternoon, holding Theo. None of them know your name. One of them has a photograph of Theo's face. That one will be retracted this morning." He paused. "I am not asking you to look at any of them. I am asking you to know they exist. Because Owen told me, and I think Owen was right, that you should not be told these things by Owen on a Friday morning in a long dress." "Owen is coming." "At 3, with Beatrice from the foundation, and a small woman called Hilda, who is the only honest person in the public relations industry I have ever met. They will tell us what to do. We will not, today, do any of it. I would like, today, if you are up to it, to take you and Theo to the conservatory and let him show you the windows he has been polishing." Mara did not let go of his hand. "Adrian." "Yes." "What were you about to say to the editor?" "I was about to suggest, very politely, that he take a long holiday." "And if he printed it anyway?" "Then I was going to buy his paper." She looked at him. "You were going to buy his paper?" "It is for sale. Most of them are. It would have been a slow morning's work. Owen would have shouted. I would have done it anyway." "Adrian." "Yes?" "Do not buy a newspaper because someone took my photograph on a terrace." "I will try." "Try harder." "I will." She let go of his hand. She turned to go. "Mara." "Yes?" "You came downstairs in a tunic and stockings." "I did." "It is the loveliest thing this room has had in it in 11 years. She did not, on her way back through the door, allow him to see her face. That afternoon, the chairman of the Hale Foundation came to the house. He was a thin man in his 50s, named Owen Mears, and he had been Adrian's roommate at university. And he was the only person in the world, apart from Rosa, who had ever been allowed to call Adrian by a nickname. He arrived in a plain car. He carried a leather portfolio. He went straight to the south suite without sending up a card. He stood in the doorway. He looked at Mara. He set the portfolio down on the writing desk. "Mara," he said, "I am not going to apologize for any of this, because I did not know about any of it. And apologies for things one did not know about are an insult. I am here because Adrian asked me. There is a small problem we need to solve, and we need to solve it before Friday." Mara put down the magazine she had not been reading. "What is on Friday?" "The annual shareholders' gala. 1,500 people, 300 of them with notebooks, and a great many of them with telephones. Until Sunday morning, your existence was a secret. Until Sunday morning, the existence of Theodore James Quinn was a secret. As of yesterday morning, both facts are a problem at 3 competing tabloids, and, as of this morning, at one rather more reputable magazine. Your face has not yet been printed. Theodore's face has not yet been printed. We have, perhaps, until Thursday." Owen Mears sat down in the chair Vivian had used. Adrian's first instinct was to call every editor personally and threaten them. I've talked him out of it. His second instinct was to pay them. I've talked him out of that as well. His third instinct was to invite you to the gala on Friday and introduce you to the entire room as his fiancé and Theodore as his son, and walk into the storm with both of you on his arm. That instinct I have not been able to talk him out of. He has asked me to ask you, whether you would consent.
Owen,
Yes?
that sounds like a very stupid idea.
Owen Mears smiled, the faintest possible smile, and inclined his head. It is a very stupid idea, he said. It is also the only idea that I can see which leaves you both with any dignity. I have been chairman of the Hale Foundation for 9 years. I have seen what happens when families like this one allow themselves to be photographed running. I would prefer you not run. I would prefer you stand in a long dress beside the man whose name you have, between the two of you, kept out of the newspapers for 4 years. And that the room look at you. And that Adrian say what he intends to say. And that the photographs be the photographs we choose. After that, the tabloids do not have a story. They have a photograph of a fiancé. They have a photograph of a small boy in a small suit who, by the way, will not be at the gala past 9 o'clock, because he will be at home asleep, because his mother is sensible. Do you understand?
I understand.
Will you do it? Mara was quiet.
I am 5 months along, Owen, she said. I have been on bed rest for 5 days. I have not in 3 years owned a long dress.
The bed rest has been lifted, with conditions, by Dr. Bell. I checked this morning. As to the dress, I have been instructed to inform you that there is a woman waiting in the green room downstairs with 3 options, none of which you are obliged to accept. As to the rest of it,
Owen leaned forward with his hands clasped.
I have known Adrian for 20 years. I have not, in 20 years, seen him afraid of anything. He is afraid of this. He is afraid of asking you. He is afraid you will say no. And he is afraid you will say yes. And he is afraid that whichever you say, he will not deserve. He sent me up because he thought, correctly, that if he asked you himself, you would say yes for the wrong reason. He would like you to say yes for the right reason, or not at all. He did not, in fact, send me. I came. He does not know I am here. Mara closed her eyes. Of course he doesn't. Will you do it?
On one condition.
Name it.
He stands beside me on Friday, and he says it himself. Not a press release, not a statement. He says it himself, into the room. He names me. He names Theo. He names the baby. He says what his mother did. And he says what he is going to do about it. He does not ask me to be brave on his behalf and then go home and let the lawyers handle the rest. If he wants to stand publicly, he stands publicly. All of it. Owen Mears regarded her. That is a very large ask of him. Yes. You understand it will end at least 3 of his board relationships. Yes. You understand it may cost him a percentage of the share price for a quarter. Yes. You understand he will not hesitate. That, Mara said, is what I am counting on. Owen Mears nodded once. He stood up. He picked up the portfolio. I will tell him, he said. He will agree. He would have agreed to dance through the lobby in his stockings. I am, I think, going to get back into my plane car and drive to the office and have a small whiskey at 4 in the afternoon, which I have not done in 9 years, because I am, against my own better judgment, going to enjoy Friday. He paused at the door. Mara. Yes. I should have asked sooner where you were. I am sorry. Owen. Yes. Send up the woman with the 3 dresses. At once. The woman with the 3 dresses arrived. She was Italian and brisk and not given to commentary. The first dress was white silk, and Mara dismissed it before it left the bag. The second dress was deep navy, with long sleeves and a high neck, and a softly draped front that fell over the bump in a way that did not pretend the bump was not there. Mara put her hand against the fabric. It was the color of a winter sea at dusk. It was the color of the coat Adrian had been wearing the night they met, in a bookshop,
both of them reaching for the same shelf.
"This one,"
Mara said. The woman nodded, satisfied. "The third," she said, "we will send back. Some choices are easy." That night, Adrian came in after Theo had gone to sleep. He brought the small cup of milk she had taken to drinking before bed. He set it on the nightstand. He sat in the chair. "Owen tells me," he said.
"Yes."
"You said yes."
"On a condition."
"He told me the condition. I accept it. I have a question."
"What?"
"Marry me." Mara looked at him. "Adrian, I am aware I have not been allowed to use this question in 4 years. I am aware I do not have the right to it, possibly ever. I am asking because I would prefer, on Friday, to tell the room something true. I would prefer the word fiancé not to be a word my friend Owen is using to manage a crisis. I would prefer it to be a word I asked you for, in this room, and that you said, in this room, you would consider. I am not asking you to answer tonight. I am asking you to consider it." He paused. "I have a ring. I had it 4 years ago. I have, since Tuesday morning, considered in some detail whether to bring it into this room. I have decided not to. A ring is a thing one accepts or returns, and either gesture has weight. And I do not, this week, want to ask you for a gesture. I am asking for the question. The ring will be in my coat pocket on Friday. If, on Friday, you wish to wear it, I will know." Mara did not look away. "And if I do not?" "Then I will tell the room that you are the mother of my son and the mother of my unborn child and the woman whose name belongs to this family, and I will not say the word fiancé, and I will mean every word I do say, and I will not, on Saturday, ask you again." "Adrian." "Yes." "Did you mean every word of that?" "Yes." "All right," Mara said. She picked up the cup of milk. She held it carefully in both hands. She did not drink it. "I will consider it." Adrian did not, that night, say anything else. He sat with her until she had finished the milk. He took the cup. He put it on the tray. He stood up. He went to the door. He paused. "Mara." "Yes." "Thank you for the toast." "What?" "On the morning, the first morning, you ate the toast." She remembered the saucer in her son's small hands, the salted butter. "Adrian." "Yes." "You buttered too much." He smiled, very faintly. He closed the door behind him. There was, on the Wednesday before the gala, a small thing that became, later, a large thing. The Hale Foundation kept, on permanent loan in a glass case in the long gallery, a small Dutch interior. It had been bought at auction in the year Adrian was born, and it had a careful brass plate beneath it, with the name of a 17th century painter on it, and it was due, on the following Monday, to be presented as a gift, in Vivian Hale's name, to a small but reputable provincial museum. Owen had brought the inventory list to the South Suite for Adrian's signature on his way out, the afternoon before. He had left it on the writing desk. Adrian had been on the telephone. The list had stayed on the desk overnight. On Wednesday morning, Mara, in the same loose tunic, walking, slowly, the long upstairs gallery for her permitted afternoon exercise, paused in front of the small Dutch interior in its glass case. She stood in front of it for a long time. Theo, holding her hand, considered the painting with her. "Mama?" "Yes, baby." "Is it a nice picture?" "It is a nice picture, Theo." "Why do you look at it like that?" Mara, who had not spoken aloud, in any room, of art history in nearly 4 years, turned her head slowly to her son. "Because I think someone has painted it twice," she said. "And I think they have hung the wrong one." She went, very slowly, downstairs. She found Adrian in the library. "Adrian." "Yes."
The small Dutch interior in the glass case in the long gallery. He looked up, surprised. Yes. You are giving it to a museum on Monday. My mother is, with my signature. Take it down. What? Take it down, today. Do not, this week, send it to anyone. Have Owen send for the man at the Rijksmuseum who used to come to your father's lunches. Have him look at the back of the panel, the lower left corner of the back of the panel. There will be a small stamp under the wax. The stamp will not match the catalogue raisonné for that painter. The brushwork on the woman's left ear is wrong. The pigment in the blue of the jug is wrong, by about 140 years. It is a copy. It is, I would guess, a copy made in the 1880s for an English collector who wanted a Dutch wall. Adrian Hale stared at her. How do you know this? Because I wrote a thesis at 22 on workshop copies of Dutch interiors made for the English market, Adrian. I sat in a library for 2 years staring at panels exactly like that one. There were 9 of them in the thesis. I think the one in your gallery is the 10th. I have, since the day I came to work here, walked past that case 11 times. I have, every time, told myself I was imagining it. Today I am too tired to imagine. Take it down. He took it down within the hour. The man from the Rijksmuseum, who had indeed been one of Adrian's father's lunch guests, came on a private flight on Thursday morning. He spent 40 minutes alone in a small white room with the panel. He emerged, and he asked Adrian, very politely, whether he might use the telephone in the library, and he made a single call, in Dutch, of about 3 minutes. He came out into the hall. He found Adrian and Mara waiting. Mr. Hale, he said. Miss Quinn. I would like, if I may, to be the first to thank you both, very formally. The signature beneath the wax is the workshop mark of a master copyist named Cornelis van der Velde, working in Haarlem in the 1790s. The panel is genuinely 17th century, but it has been overpainted. It is a beautiful object. It is also, very precisely, not by the painter on your brass plate. The Provincial Museum was about to receive a gift which would, within 6 months, have been published as a forgery in 3 art journals. The Hale Foundation would have been, in that publication, named as the giver. He paused. Miss Quinn, I do not say this lightly. There are perhaps 15 people in Europe who could have made the call you made on Wednesday morning, walking past a glass case with a small child, in stockings. I am one of them. I have spent 40 years in this profession. I should very much like, if you are ever willing, to have lunch with you. I have a chair to fill in March. We can speak about it later. I will say only this, and then I will not impose. Mr. Hale, you have, in your gallery, a wife who has, for 3 months, been scrubbing your marble. I will leave you both to consider what you wish to do about that. He bowed slightly to Mara. He left. Mara, in the hall, did not look at Adrian. Mara. Yes. You wrote a thesis on Dutch panels at 22. I did. You did not tell me. You did not ask me, Adrian. You met me in a bookshop. You bought me coffee. You asked me about the book. I told you about the book. You did not, in the 4 months between coffee and the ring, ever ask me what I had written. I did not, in the 4 months, mind. I was 23. I did not yet know that not being asked was a thing. I know it now. I do not now hold it against you. I am only telling you. Today, I told you. Today you took the panel down. Today the man from the Rijksmuseum offered me a lunch. I have not, in 4 years, been offered a lunch. Mara. I am not, Adrian, asking for anything. I am only saying, because today I have the breath for it, that there was a person under the apron. There was a person under the dress in the bookshop. The person is the same person. She has, since the bookshop, raised your son. She has, since the wedding, carried your daughter. She has, this morning, saved the foundation a public scandal. She could have, had she been a different sort of woman, said nothing about. She is telling you, while she has the breath, that the apron was never the whole of her. I should not have to tell you. You should know. You should have known in the bookshop. You will, henceforward, know. I will know. Good. She turned. She went, slowly, back upstairs. Adrian Hale stood alone in the marble hall. He looked, for a long time, at the empty glass case at the far end of the gallery. He pressed the heel of his hand against his mouth. Then he picked up the telephone in the hall, and he called Owen Mears, and he said, very quietly, "When you come on Friday afternoon, Owen, bring me, also, the chair appointment papers for the Rijksmuseum's spring lecture. I would like to know what they pay. If they do not pay enough, the foundation will, with Mara's permission, top it up. I'm not negotiating. I'm asking you to bring the papers." Owen, on the other end of the line, did not, for once, argue. "I will bring them," he said. Friday came. The day arrived, the way days that have been counted toward arrive, in the small, ordinary increments of a household. Tea at 7. The heavy curtains drawn back at past. Rosa moving along the upstairs corridor with an armful of folded linen. The gardener's distant rake scraping somewhere on the south path. Theo, in his little dressing gown, stood at the window of the south suite and watched two finches argue, with great gravity, over a single seed in the gravel. He turned to his mother every minute or so and reported, in a confidential whisper, what the finches were doing. Mara, with her hair already pinned by Rosa's friend in long, quiet sections, listened to her son and watched, in the dressing-table mirror, a woman she had not, in some time, recognized. A woman with color in her cheeks. A woman in a soft dressing gown. A woman who had eaten a full breakfast without thinking about it. A woman whose hands today did not shake when she lifted a teacup. Outside, the light along the south lawn turned, in the late morning, the particular pale gold of an autumn day that intends to behave. The hired florists arrived at noon with 3 vans and went silently into the ballroom. The caterers came at 1. The men in dark coats from the firm of stewards Owen used for these occasions arrived at 2 and stood at attention along the marble corridor leading to the ballroom doors, in such precise stillness that Theo, padding past in his slippers, paused to inspect them, and was rewarded with 3 identical solemn bows. He bowed back. He told them, with the dignity of a 4-year-old in a new dressing gown, that they could continue. Mara had not, in 3 years, been in a room with more than 30 adults at once. The ballroom of the Hale Foundation Gala held 1,500. The chandeliers had been rehung for the occasion, and there were 3 orchestras, and there was, against one wall, an ice sculpture of a swan that had begun, by the time Mara and Adrian descended the stairs, to look slightly tired around the wings. Mara wore the navy silk. Her hair had been dressed by a girl Rosa knew. There were small pearls at her ears. She did not, when she came down the stairs on Adrian's arm, look like a maid. She did not look like a fiancée either. She looked, she suspected, like a woman who had walked through the worst week of her life and had decided, on the morning of the 7th day, to put on a dress and not apologize for any of it. The room noticed her at the 3rd stair. The cameras began at the 4th. Adrian, beside her, was very calm. He had told her, in the car, that he was terrified. He did not look terrified now. He looked, she thought, like a man who had spent 4 years rehearsing, in some private and unattended room, the speech he was about to give, and had finally been given the room. Owen Mears intercepted them at the foot of the stairs. He kissed Mara's hand. He clapped Adrian once on the shoulder. He nodded toward the dais. "You have the floor at 9:30, he said. "I've already told the orchestras to stop. I've told the cameras they may approach. I have not told them what you are going to say. I look forward to finding out." Mara was introduced, in those first 30 minutes, to more important people than she had ever been introduced to in her life. They smiled. Some of them, the older women, looked at the bump under the navy silk with a polite, brittle attention. Some of them, the younger women, looked at her face with the curiosity of people who had been hoping to see the front of a story they had only seen the back of. None of them, she noticed, were rude. Owen had, evidently, made a number of telephone calls. The ballroom, at 9:20, was the kind of room that explains, by its own architecture, why people like the Hales had once been able to hold the attention of a city. The ceiling rose in 3 painted vaults to a small constellation of plaster stars. The chandeliers, recently rehung, threw their light down through old crystal in narrow, trembling lines, the way lantern light moves on the surface of a pond in moving air. Along the long east wall, 3 sets of tall windows opened onto a stone terrace. Through them, in the soft autumn dusk, a thin line of garden lamps marked the edge of the south lawn. The orchestras, arranged at 3 corners of the room, alternated by long tradition, in such a way that the music was always coming from one place and being answered from another, and the room never went quite silent until someone wanted it to. The crowd in such a ballroom was, also by long tradition, 3 crowds at once. The older crowd at the small round tables along the wall, who came for the orchestras and the food, and the ritual nodding to people they had seen at the same gala for 30 years. The middle crowd in the cleared center, who came to be seen and to circulate, and to make, with their slow, careful patterns, the necessary photographs of the evening. And the young crowd at the open doors of the terrace, who came in long dresses and unbuttoned coats, and did most of their actual conversation outside in the cold. All 3 crowds, this evening, had at one point or another turned their faces toward the staircase. All 3 crowds had now arranged themselves with a kind of theatrical politeness, in such a way that they could see, from wherever they were standing, the dais at the far end of the room. The cameras, at 9:23, lowered themselves a fraction. The orchestras took, by some signal Mara did not catch, the long pause that musicians take when they have been told that the next thing in the room will not be theirs. At 9:25, Adrian led her up onto the dais. The room went quiet. The orchestras stopped. The chandeliers did not dim. The cameras did not flash. The waiters stopped circulating with their trays. 1,500 people, in formal dress, turned, very slowly, toward the man at the microphone with a woman in navy beside him. Adrian Hale put one hand on the small of Mara's back. He cleared his throat. He spoke without notes. "My name," he said, "you know. Most of you have shaken my hand at least once. Some of you have done business with me. Some of you have done business against me. I am the chairman of Hale Capital. I am the trustee of the Hale Foundation. I am, on paper, the head of a family. I am, tonight, going to use the microphone for a private matter. I will be brief. I will not, after tonight, use this microphone, or any microphone, for a private matter again." The room did not move. 4 years ago, Adrian said, I was engaged to be married to a young woman named Mara Quinn. Some of you knew her. Some of you sat at a dinner table with her on the 3rd of November, the year I lost my father. Most of you did not. 4 years ago, while I was in Singapore for what became a 6-month absence, my mother arranged, in my absence and in my name, for that engagement to be broken. She wrote a letter on my stationery. She had my name signed by another hand. She had the recipient's telephone disconnected, her flat surrendered, and her name placed on a list at my office that prevented her calls from reaching me. She did this, I am told, because she believed she was protecting me. She did this, I am also told, in 3 weeks. I did not, until 3 days ago, know any of it. I have, since being told, removed her from the foundation board, the museum board, and the executive of the Christmas committee, with her cooperation. She has resigned her positions in writing. The letters are with my office. They will be filed publicly on Monday. The room did not move. 4 years ago, Adrian said, the woman beside me was carrying a child. She did not know it that Tuesday afternoon when my mother visited her flat. She knew it 3 weeks later. She did what a person of her courage and her circumstances would do. She left. She went home to her mother's village. She had a baby in a small public hospital. She named him for her grandfather. She raised him alone, on what she earned by her own work. His name is Theodore James Quinn. He is 3 years old. He is asleep at this hour, in the south wing of my house, under the supervision of a housekeeper who has known me since I was 6. He is my son. There was, for the first time, a small intake of sound from the room. It was not a gasp. It was the sound of 1,500 people remembering, simultaneously, to breathe.
1 year ago, Adrian said. The woman beside me and I crossed paths again, briefly, at the wedding of a mutual friend. We did not then repair the silence between us. The silence was longer than one night. The morning after, I was called away on business, and she did not allow me to find her again. She had her reasons. They were good reasons. She is, today, 16 weeks along with my second child. Now, finally, the cameras flashed. Adrian did not flinch. 3 months ago, he said, Mara Quinn took a position in my house under another name because she had lost her teaching post and she had a small son to feed, and she did not wish to ask me, the man she still believed had once written her a letter, for help. She has been, in my house, on her hands and knees, scrubbing a marble floor for 90 days. I did not know it. I learned it on Sunday evening, when I came home unannounced from Tokyo. I have, since then, asked her 2 questions. I asked her to stay. She has, conditionally, agreed. I asked her to marry me. She has, conditionally, agreed to consider it. He paused. I will, in a moment, ask her one more question, in this room, in front of you, because she asked it of me, and because I owe it to her, and because I would prefer the answer to be hers in public, rather than mine in private. The room held very still. Mara. She looked at him. I am not, Adrian said, a man who has been good to you. The arithmetic is simple. You have raised my son for 3 years without me. You have carried my second child for 4 months without me. You have scrubbed my floor for 90 days under a name that was not your name. I have, against this, 4 days of toast and tea and Dr. Bell. I am not asking you to forgive me. Forgiveness is a private matter, and it will take, I expect, a number of years, and I am prepared to spend them. I am asking you, in this room, in front of these people, to allow me to use, in public, one word. He did not, for the first time in his life, sound like the chairman of anything. He sounded like a man at the wrong end of a long corridor, trying to walk back. May I, Mara, in this room, call you my fiancé? Mara looked at him for a long moment. She thought of the marble floor. She thought of the bucket of soapy water. She thought of her son in the pajamas with the little white stars on the cot beside the bed, and the man buttering toast at 6 in the morning. She thought of a Tuesday afternoon 4 years ago, and a check she had not taken. She thought of a navy coat in a bookshop, and a ring she had never seen, and a letter she had once kept in a drawer for 3 years before she had been able to throw it away. She thought of what a person owed to herself, and what a person owed to her children, and what a person, in the end, owed to the truth. She thought of Theo, asleep in the south wing, under the watch of a woman who had, 4 years ago, given her a uniform and a key without asking why. She did not, in the end, think very long. You may, she said. Then, because she was the woman she was, and because the room was the room it was, she turned to the cameras and said, in a clear, calm voice, His mother is no longer in the photograph. Please remove her from your captions. Adrian Hale, in front of 1,500 people, laughed.
It was a real laugh. It came out of him like a thing he had been holding back for 4 years. He took her hand. He raised it to his lips. He did not then bring out the ring. He reached, instead, into the inner pocket of his coat. He brought out a small black box, worn at the corners. He held it on his open palm for her to see. "I will not put it on you," he said quietly, for her ears alone, while the room applauded around them. "Not in this room. Not in front of this many people. I would like, if I may, to put it on you in the south suite, with Theo on the bed, with my hand in the bump where our daughter is, with the lamp on low and the door closed, and no one watching but us." "Yes," Mara said. "Yes, there, like that." He closed his hand around the box. He let her down off the dais. The room came back together around them in the slow way rooms come back together after a held breath. A violin somewhere on the Eastern Orchestra, trying a single tentative note and being answered by another. The low collective murmur of 1,500 guests beginning, all at once, to have the conversation they had each been holding on the inside of their teeth for the last 6 minutes. The soft, deliberate movement of waiters resuming their circuits with their trays. Owen Mears, in the small, clear space at the foot of the dais, intercepted the first of the photographers with a polite, raised hand and the kind of smile that had, for 9 years, ended press scrums on his own driveway, and turned them, with great courtesy, in the direction of the prepared statement his small Hilda had had ready, in 3 printed copies since 6 o'clock. Adrian did not, in the end, walk Mara through the room. He led her, instead, by the hand, down the long corridor that ran behind the dais, past the kitchens, past the small closed door that gave onto the staff stair, out through a side door into the south garden. The autumn air was cold and quiet. The stone of the terrace had held the day's pale gold light and given it back as a faint warmth under their feet. Somewhere far above, in the small lit window of the south wing, Theo, in his pajamas with the little white stars on them, who had been promised by his mother a full report in the morning, was sitting on the cot beside the bed with his stuffed grey rabbit, listening with great patience to Rosa read aloud from a book about a small bear who lived under a teapot. Adrian, in the cold air, stopped on the terrace. He turned to Mara. He set his coat carefully around her shoulders. He did not, this time, kneel. He took her face between his hands. He looked at her for a long, quiet moment. "Mara." "Yes?" Inside, in front of all of them, was the easy part. Tomorrow morning, when the photographs are on every breakfast table in the city, will be the next part. The part after that, I do not know. I will, every morning of it, be in the room with you. I will not, again, be away. Do you understand?" "I understand." He did not, then, kiss her. He pressed his forehead, very gently, to hers. They stood that way, on the cold stone, with his coat around her shoulders, while the music started up again behind the closed glass doors of the ballroom. Then they went home. 6 months later, on a soft grey morning at the end of October, Mara Hale stood at the window of the south suite with one hand resting on the small, warm head of her newborn daughter, and watched her older son turn cartwheels, badly, on the south lawn. The lawn was strewn with leaves. Theo was wearing a coat that was too big for him, because Adrian had bought it 3 sizes too large, on the optimistic grounds that boys grew. Theo did not, today, mind. He was 4 years old now. He had, in his small breast pocket, a ring of brass house keys that the new butler had presented to him with great ceremony, as the official assistant in charge of cataloguing the conservatory. Adrian was on the lawn beside him. He was wearing a jumper. He had not, 4 years ago, owned a jumper. He had, recently, learned to. He was holding a small girl up against his shoulder. The small girl was 3 weeks old. Her name was Eliza Quinn Hale. She had her mother's hair, and her father's grey eyes, and her brother's habit of falling asleep on whichever shoulder was nearest. She was, at this moment, asleep. Theo did another cartwheel. He landed on his side. He laughed. Adrian, balancing his daughter carefully, sat down on the leaves with one hand and said something to his son that Mara could not hear through the glass. Theo nodded gravely. He sat down beside his father. He took the small grey rabbit out of his coat pocket and placed it carefully in his sister's lap. He told her, very seriously, what its name was. The baby slept on. In the kitchen below, Rosa was making toast. In the marble hall, the morning light fell on a floor that no one, this morning, was scrubbing. Mara turned from the window. She crossed the room. She picked up the small navy box from the writing desk where she still kept it, even though the ring was, and had been for 6 months, on her hand. She opened it. She closed it. She put it back. She paused at the door. She looked once around the room. The cot was gone. The chair by the window was empty. The tea tray had been cleared. The room, in 6 months, had become a room she lived in and would, soon, no longer need. She went down the corridor. She went down the wide staircase. She crossed the marble hall in her stocking feet because she had, today, forgotten her shoes, and because the marble was, she had discovered, a lovely cool surface to walk on in stockings on a soft grey October morning. She went out the side door into the garden. Adrian looked up. His face changed, the way it always changed now when he saw her, from a face that was watching the world to a face that had found the thing in it that mattered. He held up his free hand. She came to him. She sat down beside him on the leaves. He passed Eliza into her arms without comment. He put his arm around her. Theo climbed into her lap without ceremony. He put his head against her shoulder. He looked at his sister. Theo, leaning against his mother's side, declared, in the matter-of-fact whisper he reserved for important pronouncements, that this was a good house. His mother kissed the top of his head and agreed that it was. The boy considered his father then, with the slow, deliberate gravity that, in his short life, he reserved for moments that required, in his own opinion, the full weight of memory. He reminded Adrian, in a low, important voice, of the morning of the toast, and of the quantity of butter on it, and of the small but undeniable fact that, on that first morning, Adrian had buttered, in his son's professional judgment, too much. Adrian looked at his son. He looked at his wife. He looked at his daughter, asleep against her mother's shoulder. He confessed, with great seriousness, that he remembered. He accepted, with equal seriousness, the boy's verdict that he had, in the 4 years since, improved. Theo, satisfied, leaned his head against his mother's collarbone and closed his eyes against the autumn light. The leaves were the colour of old copper coins and very pale honey and the inside of a polished walnut shell, and they had collected, the way leaves do in October, in the small dry hollows along the edge of the south path, and in the gravel ruts at the foot of the conservatory steps, and in the round, shallow basin of the ornamental pond, where, in the late afternoons, the koi nudged them apart from below in slow, patient, lazy circles. The sky over the south lawn was the soft, particular grey of a sky that has decided not to rain, and has not yet decided what else to do. The air carried the small, clean smell of damp earth, and of the late roses still working in the conservatory, and of wood smoke from the cottage at the edge of the garden, where the gardener, on Saturdays, lit the morning fire in a small iron stove, and drank his tea in the doorway in his shirt-sleeves, and watched, with a look of mild proprietary satisfaction, the household of the great house assembling itself in the autumn world he had spent 40 years quietly preparing. The leaves moved, very gently, in the autumn air. Somewhere inside the house, Rosa was singing, in a voice she did not know carried, an old song from the village where Mara had been born. Eliza, in her mother's arms, made a small sound in her sleep. Theo settled against his mother's side. Adrian, beside them both, did not say anything for a long time. He did not need to. The marble floor inside the house was clean. The windows were clean. The brass watering cans, polished by a small, careful hand on a low stool, were standing in a neat row in the conservatory. The garden was full of leaves. The morning was long. Somewhere in a Tuesday afternoon 4 years ago, a young woman had refused a check. Somewhere on a Sunday evening 3 months ago, a billionaire had come home unannounced from Tokyo and found his first love on her knees. Somewhere in a small voice on a staircase, a child had called a stranger by his right name. The strangers were no longer strangers. The first love was no longer first, because she was, now, also last. The exhausted woman in the apron was, now, the woman in the garden, with one child in her lap and another on her shoulder, and a man beside her who had, at last, learned how to sit on the cold ground in the autumn and not, for any reason on earth, get up. Adrian Hale did not get up. Mara, beside him, leaned her head against his shoulder. The leaves moved. The morning held.